I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good morning, Bowling Green. Good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to everyone on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm about to bring you an incredible hour of radio called For a Green Future. And I just want to tell Jared that we're getting a bit of an echo here, so hopefully he can work on that. But our theme song didn't sound too bad as a round. You know, it was interesting. So anyway, I am broadcasting today from Omaha, Nebraska. And it's because I went to Colorado. I went to Loveland, Colorado for Thanksgiving, spent it with my son. It was really great, and got some observations on that. But first I want to tell you that For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment. And we talk about it in the ways that it affects you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your families and your co-workers, and the birds and the bees and the fish and the trees, and pretty much everybody and everything, because like it or not, all of us are together here on this planet called Earth. And we have a good show lined up for you today. We've got, you can call in at any time, 877-909-1007. That's 877-909-1007. And then hopefully at some point we'll be joined by my co-host, Rebecca Wood. She always finds it a little, oh, you're here. Hey, Rebecca. Okay, so that's great. Good morning. And so Rebecca is good. Well, first we're going to have a little chat for the next 10 minutes or so. Then we've got a great guest calling in, a fella named Dr. Andrew Hoffman, who wants us to call him Andy. So we've got an interview with Andy, and that's going to be talking about sort of the cultural aspects of why people deny global warming. And then Rebecca, it'll be your turn at the mic. What do you have to talk about today? World AIDS Day. Oh, interesting. So we're going to keep going. Anyway, Rebecca, sorry. And I know, you know, I was listening to some of the Cheap Seats show before our program came on, and I know Mick's been very clear that he doesn't want like sympathy, but I think it's not sympathetic that, you know, we here on For a Green Future are wishing Mick a speedy recovery. That's just, you know, we just want Mick to get better, that's all. So that's something there. So anyway, here I am traveling. I'm actually broadcasting from a hotel room today. And as I said, I'm in Omaha, but I wanted to share some eco-observations on my trip out west here, because I can't help myself. You know, I really want to, I have to look at what's going on. And so I noticed on the trip here, one thing I wanted to talk about was the birds I noticed. I saw a bunch of eagles in Iowa near the wind turbines there, and we're going to talk more about the wind turbines later. But once again, my observations are that eagles and wind turbines are getting together. They're living alongside each other, and we can have both, folks. A lot of people are saying that wind turbines will wipe out eagles, but I keep seeing them whenever I drive through Iowa. So next.
Okay, I'm back. I got my earphones, and you're as loud as ever. You're echoey.
Okay, you're all plugged in, huh?
Yeah, that's
I am. Yeah, it's not helping.
Oh, well. Let's see.
We tried.
I was hoping that was it. Anyway, so I saw a bunch of Canada geese all over, and interestingly, the Canada geese are really confused this year. I mean, they still have not headed south. They're flying around east, west, north, south, just every which way. And we've been reporting on that in Ohio, but it's true all the way from Ohio to Colorado. We're seeing Canada geese just kind of flapping around and not really migrating anywhere. Kind of nice. I saw a bunch of pelicans while I was there in Loveland, and they're really intense birds. They're so huge, and I think they look more prehistoric than most other birds. You know, I see pelicans and I think dinosaur, because they're just so big and they got those big heads. Makes me think of tyrannosaurs or something. But one bird that I saw that I really was not expecting were Sandhill cranes. And I saw thousands and thousands of them migrating. And I was kind of like, this is kind of crazy, because Kearney is the capital of Sandhill migration every year in the spring. They go there, but Sandhill crane migration is supposed to peak in September. And a lot of birders, turns out, have been really upset, really panicky, because they've been thinking that the Sandhill crane population must have crashed because they did not migrate in September or October or November. They're migrating now. They're now migrating in December, 3 months late. So I've seen thousands and thousands of them going overhead. They winter in New Mexico, and other southern areas there. So it's really kind of bizarre that they're migrating this late, and it's just yet another piece of information, another little piece of evidence that global warming is really happening. And so it was kind of nice to see Sandhill cranes. I love them, but it was kind of weird to see them in December. Wind turbines. Once again, I always love going in through the wind fields. I take I-80 through, and Iowa, which is getting 80% of its electricity from wind right now, which is what Ohio could be doing if we didn't have such a terrible backwards energy policy here. But I love to see the wind turbines. They were going full blast, generating tons of electricity. Unfortunately, I didn't see a lot more turbines than usual. I mean, they're not expanding. They're not being built out at the rate that they should be. And that's reflective of what's been going on nationally. Under the Biden administration, wind turbine installations peaked, or the increase in the number of wind turbines peaked in 2020, and it's been falling steadily during the whole Biden administration. And we've talked about that before, because part of what's going on is that while the Bidens are subsidizing nuclear directly, like literally just saying to the criminal nuclear companies like Holtec, here's 1.5 billion cash. and Biden, I think, signs those checks personally because he loves nukes so much. But what they did for wind is they give them tax credits, which, if you're a corporation that owes taxes, is great because it's kind of like income, but it's not the cold hard cash you really need to invest in new technology and new buildings. So the number of wind turbines did increase in 2023. In fact, they added about 10 gigawatts of new wind versus in 2020 when they added 20 gigawatts. So over the 10-year average, wind has been growing in the US about 9% average. And that's below the rest of the world, which has been increasing at 13%, and below China, which has been increasing at 19%. So we're falling behind. Now, we are still the second biggest wind power generator in the world, just because we're so big and because because Texas has been leading the way to the switch to wind. One other positive thing is that the size of wind turbines have been increasing. Way back in 2020, or 2015, excuse me, the average wind turbine was only 2 megawatts. Now it's 3.4 megawatts. And that's a huge difference because whenever you increase the rotor diameter, it's the square of the area. So, for example, now we have a 440-foot diameter to the average new wind turbine versus 336, that was about the size of a football field. Now we're about a football field and a half. So the fewer turbines are being installed, but the ones that are installed are much more efficient, and we're getting a lot more power out of them. And of course, the price has been dropping. From 2015, it was $1,700 per kilowatt hour for wind. Now it's down to $1,050, which is a huge drop in cost. So even though they've been getting cheaper, more efficient, producing more power, the rate of their installation has been declining under the Biden administration. And he's not totally to blame. As we know, in Ohio, the Republicans have passed laws that essentially ban wind power in Ohio, new wind power. So, and that's true in a lot of states, especially ones that are controlled by Republicans. Although in Iowa, they still have 80% of their electricity from wind. So that's enough about wind turbines. Also, another observation, of course, that strikes me whenever I drive across the country is just how much of our country is being used to grow cattle. I mean, there's both the corn that's being grown, which takes up millions and millions of acres. And this time I saw thousands, hundreds of thousands of cows in stockyards along I-80 and I-76. And as we were leaving Loveland, actually I started to notice a manure odor, and 5 miles later, we came across these incredible stockyards. They might have had 100,000 cows in them. I mean, just acres and acres and acres of fences with cows, and they're all destined for hamburgers and steaks. And to put this in scale, humans are biomass. So if every human in the world were able to get together on a scale, and you weighed all of us, we weigh about, all 8 billion of us, we about 390 million tons. Now, if you took all our cows, put them on the scale, they weigh 420 million tons. In other words, there's more cow than humans on this planet. And of course, that includes the huge land footprint of the corn that we grow to feed to these cows. And so that's why you get manure smells for 10 miles radius around the stockyards around Loveland, Colorado. One other last observation on my eco observation on this trip was it turns out Loveland was in the middle of a drought, just like most of Ohio, and it was really dramatic there because they have a lot of lakes around Loveland, and a lot of those lakes were just like bare dirt with a little trickle of water running through them. According to the government, the area north of Denver, which is where Loveland is at D3, which is considered extreme drought. So half of Colorado is in drought. More than 3/4 of Ohio is in drought. But the whole country, there's drought all over the continent of North America. So a couple other just random observations. One is we went some hiking in some natural areas, and a really striking thing we saw was this big, healthy looking coyote, except that he was dead and frozen into the water of a canal. And I think, my forensic deduction here is that he probably ate rats that were poisoned, because there's rat poison traps all over the place at apartments and all the buildings and stuff. And so they eat the rats that have eaten the warfarin, and that warfarin poison causes extreme thirst. And so probably this poor coyote went to the canal after eating the poisoned rat and was drinking it when he died. There was also a dead mall in Loveland, which was kind of interesting. My son and I explored it. It's just kind of a harbinger of things to come, I guess, because we know that this retail, this resource-consuming lifestyle literally physically can't continue forever, and whenever you find a dead mall, it kind of reminds you of that. The whole region, like Denver, Loveland, is growing. Buildings expanding everywhere. I saw a lot more electric cars around Loveland than we have around Toledo and Bowling Green. And a lot more charging stations. And my son's apartment complex actually offers 3 hours of level 2 charging for free every day, which most people who commute within a 30-mile radius, that means if you have an electric car, you won't need gas, or you would have no bill at all, because even if you're not even paying for the electricity, then you basically get to drive for free. So that was kind of a positive thing. But all these things aren't happening fast enough. And I think one of the reasons is that there's a definite population of people, and in fact, one of our recent presidential candidates, the one who won, continue to deny global warming exists at all. And so if you can't get a consensus together that a problem actually is a problem, no matter how obvious all these signs are right in front of everyone's face, if you can't get that consensus, it gets very difficult to fix the problem, to actually have people do the things they need to do. And so I attended a lecture at WBGSU from a professor who looks at this question sociologically. And so I'm going to ask Jared to go ahead and play that interview, and maybe we can figure out a little bit of what's going on here. All right, well, hello and welcome to For a Green Future. Could you please share with us your name and your title and who you're with?
My name is Andy Hoffman. I'm the Wholesome U.S. Professor of Sustainable Enterprise at the University of Michigan. So that holds joint appointments at the Business School and the School for Environment.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on. The reason I invited you is you gave a very interesting lecture at Bowling Green State University there about basically looking at the whole climate change issue from a sociological perspective. Um, so would it be an exaggeration to say that you look at this problem as a sociological problem rather than a question of like scientific debate?
I wouldn't say rather than, but I would say in addition to. I mean, it is a scientific issue, but people approach it as humans, therefore emotions and values and biases and heuristics start to come into it. So it's how we interpret information that is the center of where I'm approaching it.
Hmm. And I think reading your book there, How Culture Shapes the Climate Change Debate, I think you posit that different people do that processing very differently.
We all do it differently. Yeah, we are all complicated individuals, but we're also becoming tribal. So I think the a theme in the book is that we've got these collective value sets, these collective identities that are starting to form how we approach certain issues.
Hmm. And that collective identity can get to the point where it actually supersedes even sort of individual reason.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're playing this in the public debate, this game of gotcha. Oh, you're a hypocrite. You said this and now you say this. But people have become tribal, and someone who represents their tribe will be what they say will be accepted, and someone who doesn't represent their tribe, what they say will not be accepted. I would posit that there are people in this world that people on the left will never believe, no matter what they say, and similarly, there are people in this world that people on the right will never believe, no matter what they say.
Hmm. And so these tribes, in your book, I think you divide them up into roughly five different sorts of
That's
groups.
the Yale University does a study called the Six Americas study, and they break people into six different categories from extremely dismissive to extremely alarmed, and then the spectrum in between.
Hmm. And does that do you think that roughly corresponds to sort of the tribes we're setting up in our minds, or do you think that that's
I think that's a helpful tool to recognize that some people are completely committed to their tribe, the extremes in the debate, the tails on the bell curve, and that some are more loosely affiliated with their tribe and therefore maybe more open to discussion and maybe more willing to change their mind on certain issues.
Mhm. So got to ask you about the election here. I mean, we just had an election where one tribe was very clearly in denial about global warming, and another tribe was completely focused on it to some degree. Um, but the sociological question of how those tribes came to be, uh, at some point, don't we have to like figure out what the objective truth is, or is there like never an objective truth? It's always a subjective truth.
No, there's definitely an objective truth. I mean, uh, but again, that comes down to whether you trust the process by which you develop that truth. I mean, there is an objective truth. This chair I'm sitting on is hard and it's holding me up, and gravity is pressing me into it. Um, Science would say there's an objective truth that climate change is happening. I agree with science. I believe in the scientific method. I believe it tells us a certain truth about reality. Um, Others are less sure about that. They see a political motive within scientists. They see an economic motive, which I think is not true, but there are people who dismiss the science when it challenges their worldview.
Mhm. And there's also, we're talking about trust. You talk about that a fair bit in the book too.
Yeah.
Um, like there's different levels of distrust in terms of like trust distrusting the messenger, distrusting the message. Um, it, it's 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 kind of challenging how people would come to trust anything.
Well, don't you think that that's reflective of the times we're in right now, where many people don't trust institutions anymore, whether it's the institutions of religion, justice, the military, the police, higher education. We're in a very confused time right now where people are distrustful of institutions um, for various reasons. They've at times got things wrong. Certainly, economists did not see the Great Recession coming. That caught them totally flat-footed. Um, the religion, I mean, the Catholic Church has broken trust with the sex scandal, the sex abuse scandal. And so people turn away. And then social media feeds that, the extent to which we find information that confirms our worldview. If I want to tell you I don't trust Joe DeMare, I can find something on the web that will confirm my desire not to trust Joe DeMare.
Yeah,
And
without too much trouble. Yeah.
well, but that's the danger of social media, though. That reinforces the tribalism because I will unfriend people or disconnect from people that challenge my worldview, and therefore I create a filter bubble, and people feed that filter bubble, and you know certainly Twitter has become much more toxic and much more divisive and tribal since in the past couple of years. So people are running to other platforms, and it's just an interesting question whether other platforms can avoid that fate. I don't know. I mean, LinkedIn seems to be pretty stable, but you can always get a filter bubble no matter how you slice it.
Mhm. Would you say that people are sort of turning from the institutions? It used to be that being associated with Catholic Church or Academy of Sciences or um, that used to increase the authority of an individual, but it seems now that people, like even the people that turn towards Trump, don't necessarily trust the Republican Party itself. They trust him. Do you think we're in a time where we're shifting from the institutional trust to individual trust?
I don't know about that. I mean, Trump is an unusual character and strangely charismatic with a group of people and equally repugnant to another group of people. But certainly within certain communities, I'm in a community, I still respect police officers.
Mhm.
Um, I still respect the military. Um, so no, not everybody is turning away from the institutions, and people aren't afraid to affiliate themselves with those institutions. I'm not afraid to say I'm a professor at a top tier university, but there are people that I think would distrust me for that very reason. But I'm not going to change who I am for that. And there are certainly plenty of people who would respect the institution with which I'm connected.
Mhm. One of the purposes or points of your lecture at BGSU was to try basically to talk about how we might use this acknowledgement of sort of the tribalism and the different points of view uh, to bring us to a closer point where we can actually deal with the the actual problem of global warming. Could you just kind of review some of those
Sure.
points?
Well, I think it comes down to understanding what someone's hearing, not just what you're saying.
Mhm.
Too often we we say something in a way that works for us, not recognizing the other person's not hearing it. And I think that's an important skill to reach the people where they are. And so in the book, I point out that, as you said, the messenger is as important as the message. So if you're gonna cite somebody or quote somebody or use somebody as an authority, if you're talking to somebody who doesn't respect the authority of that person, you're not going to get anywhere. So if I use Al Gore as support for my argument, and I'm talking to someone who is a climate skeptic and thinks Al Gore fabricated this issue to make himself rich, I'm not going to get anywhere. Likewise, if I'm talking to somebody who is conflicted over this issue on religious grounds, I have to recognize that I don't have any authority on that. I am not a cleric. I am not a theologian. And so therefore I will refer to the Pope or um, Bishop Bartholomew from the Orthodox Church or the Dalai Lama, whoever will work for that person's tribe. And so that's point number one is find the tribe that works, find a representative spokesperson, connect people with people that they trust when you're trying to make points. And then the message, the people distrust the message, how it's framed. You can keep hammering people with scientific data, but if they have already seen the scientific data and don't want to accept it, can you find other frames to get through to them? Is this an issue of national security? There's a group called the CNA group that calls climate change a threat multiplier, and it will destabilize regions that the military will have to deal with. That works. Is it an economic issue? If we don't develop the next generation of wind, solar, autonomous electric vehicles, China and Germany will be very happy to do it, and we'll be buying it from them. Certainly, China already in the EV market is way ahead of us. You can frame it as a health issue. The Lancet calls climate change the number one threat emergency for the 21st century. And that's important because it now made it personal, because if it's a health emergency, it's going to affect the vulnerable population. That's very young and very old. And now they're people we care about. And so you find a way to frame it using spokespeople that the person you're talking, you put your head in their head and find people that they trust and messages that they trust and not just the ones that you trust.
Hmm.
And you'll start to get through.
Uh-huh. Now, you mentioned religion, and one of the fascinating things in your book that I hadn't really quite internalized myself was that some people still look at global warming as impossible, since that would disrupt the whole idea that there's a higher being running things like weather and climate.
For some people, yeah, we live by divine providence. God's in charge out there. But for other people, it isn't a disruption to their belief in God, that God can create nature and we can screw it up. We're quite capable of doing that. And so, um, you know, I had someone approach me say that the seas can't be rising because God promised Noah he would never flood the earth again. I don't think it's inconsistent to say, well, maybe God's not the one making the sea level rise. Maybe we're the ones doing it. And that's
Yeah.
where we have to recognize that. And this is one thing I like about Pope Francis's encyclical letter Laudato Si. He says that we've misinterpreted the Genesis mandate for millennia. That in Genesis it says we are to subdue and dominate nature. And he says, no, we have to keep until. We have to be stewards of this creation that God gave us. And that's an important responsibility to make sure it's maintained, protected, and handed on to the next generation. There's an element of the Catholic Catechism I like, the way they call pollution theft. It's theft from future generations.
Hmm.
Um, this kind of morality, it works for me, but Pope Francis has also become mired in the culture wars, where there are members of the Catholic Church that see him as the liberal pope, where Benedict was the conservative pope, and so these tribal divides happen everywhere. I mean, they're in the military. There are people in the military that support Trump and oppose Trump, and I mean it's in all of us. And there's the challenge for us, is try to move people back towards the middle and not have the tails of the debate dominate the conversation.
Okay. Well, that's just about all that we have time for. That went pretty quickly there.
Went very
Uh,
quickly.
is there anything you'd like to add?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we covered everything in here, and I thank you for the opportunity to reach your audience with what I'm trying to get across.
All right. And thank you folks for listening. Moving on. Uh, One thing we want to do every week is thank our patrons, our wonderful, wonderful patrons who've gone to patreon.com. That's Patreon. And there they signed up for a monthly donation to For a Green Future. It's really the way we keep this show on the air. And so we want to say thank you so much to our patrons and encourage people to join them. We also want to encourage people who want to advertise on For a Green Future. People who have maybe a business where they're selling electric cars, or maybe you've got a vegetarian restaurant or something that has an eco focus to it. We'd be more than happy to have you as an advertiser. Just go to Joe DeMare forogreenfuture.org. And this is a good point to remind people that every week we also rebroadcast this show as a YouTube video and a podcast. So if you're somebody who loves this show, and unfortunately if you're hearing an echo like I am, there won't be any echo on the podcast or the YouTube version. So just go to Podomatic or YouTube and search for a Green Future. Our show will pop up and you can listen to it echo free. All right, now it's time to talk to Rebecca. And I have to say that this segment of the show, Rebecca's the show, is going to touch on adult themes. So if you're somebody who maybe has some kids listening, you might want to turn the radio down for 5 minutes or so. But it's an important health thing that she's going to be talking about. So, Rebecca, are you there?
I am there. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, Monday is going to be World AIDS Day, and I wanted to point that out because AIDS is, in fact, a natural phenomenon as a virus. It's a creature just like any plant or animal, and, not that I have a special fondness for it. I like Cocker Spaniels, less the AIDS virus, but yeah, it affects other natural phenomenon and is affected by other natural phenomena, it turns out. So that's phenomena is the plural, pretty sure. Anyway, World AIDS Day was created in 1988 as a day of awareness and mourning, being at that time, a lot of people were still dying. It was suggested by James W. Byrne and Thomas Netter, who were public information officers of the WHO at the time, may still be for all I know, and approved by Dr. Jonathan Mann, of the World Program on AIDS. It was intentionally at this time because it's after the elections but before the holidays and after Thanksgiving, so you can get maximum press that way is the idea. And traditionally, the Pope releases a message every year on National AIDS Day about whatever they want to talk about. And there was also a push in 2016 to rename it World HIV Day, which makes sense because, it's really kind of HIV is the problem, AIDS is just the consequence. So, yeah, the HIV/AIDS virus is these are short for the human immunodeficiency virus and acquired immune deficiency syndrome, which results from it. AIDS is a chronic immune system disease that's caused by the HIV virus. It can infect a new host via blood, semen, or vaginal fluids, which are preventable by something that you do when you're sharing special grown-up time. Probably you know what it is. If not, call Planned Parenthood people. Ask them. There's no cure for AIDS still. It is treatable, and with meds that control infections and also prevent disease progression, which is what you want, because it doesn't cause trouble unless it progresses, basically. Some people get initial flu-like symptoms about 2 to 4 weeks after infection, and if you're on meds, though, you could have no symptoms for years, which is definitely what we want. So, discovered quite a bit of information when I asked how does the environment affect AIDS. First of all, natural disasters cause poverty, hunger, dirty water, and environmental artificial disasters really is what they are. Displacement due to weather and disruption of healthcare, all of which hasten the disease progression. And you have a better chance of infections and complications that way. You get a natural disaster or some kind of a big storm or a drought or something. You got people moving around and no place to live. Then they're crowding someplace else, and they have poor sanitation wherever they're living, economic insecurity. Deforestation disrupts the vector patterns, and therefore, like for example, a mosquito would be a vector. If you get more malaria from mosquito bites, then you're definitely be getting more cross infections with AIDS because your body can't defeat the malaria because the AIDS is holding it back, basically. You get more waterborne diseases, and also there can be conflict over limited resources after there's been a big environmental disaster leading to violence. You got refugee camps, you got that's basically just disrupting everything, setting it up for more problems.
So what you're saying is when society breaks down because of all these factors, the disease, it gets transmitted and increases in the population.
And then another fun little thing happens, which is the effect of AIDS on the environment. First of all, there's less people to patrol parks, prevent poaching, monitor waterways, what have you. So that's bad. Also, when people get AIDS, they lose jobs and can't work regularly, which means that other people in their family or they, are pursuing hunting, fishing, charcoal making, other environmentally damaging potentially activities if done wrong. If only because you can do them on your good days. It's a flexible schedule. So there's a study published in the National Library of Medicine by Lieber, Chin-Hong, Whittle, and Weiser. It calls HIV and climate change. Okay, I'm going to try and get this right. A syndemic. They are syndemics. Basically, they're going on at the same time because you get less working family members. You get worse food insecurity, and that leads to more harmful activities. And it can just it sounds suspiciously like a
positive feedback loop.
You got it. Yeah. More environmental disasters leads to more AIDS, leads to more environmental disasters.
Ah.
Basically, that's how it works.
Okay. Is that it?
That's pretty much it. Yeah. Try not to get AIDS or contribute to environmental disasters because either one is going to lead to the other.
Yes. And an interesting thing about the treatment for AIDS is that this is a virus that they found if they used 3 different treatments at once, it's called the triple cocktail, the virus doesn't mutate right and get resistant. Whereas if you only do one at a time, the virus will mutate and get resistant to each one, and you'll end up with a virus that can't be treated by any of them. So it's just
right. So you just got to overwhelm it, basically.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Rebecca.
You're welcome.
On to ecological news and our first story. I'm just calling this Weird World Weather because things are happening all over the world, and one of the interesting stories this past week was that France. This is a story on November 28th in The Guardian. Southwest France swelters in staggering 26.9 degrees Celsius November night. So basically, France had its hottest November night in history. It was 80.5 degrees. And this part of France, southwest France, has an atmospheric phenomenon where warm air comes in off of Africa and the Mediterranean, and as it goes down the side of the mountains, the Pyrenees, it compresses. And if you remember your high school physics, when you compress gas, it gets hotter because all those little molecules are bouncing around in a smaller area, and so the temperature goes up. And this temperature, 80.42, is actually for nighttime, it's dangerous because older people actually can't keep themselves cool when temperatures get that high at night, and it leads to a much greater mortality amongst older people. So anything above 68 degrees Fahrenheit is considered quote unquote tropical, and that is dangerous for people like old people and young children. And so it was 80.42 this past week in France. Europe has warmed at twice the speed of the rest of the world on average. So there's that story. Another weird world weather story. This one you probably saw if you're watching it all news or on any social media. Huge lake effect snow, downwind from Lakes Erie in Ontario. About 1,000 people were trapped on I-90, and some places are going to get 6 feet of snow by Tuesday. It's hit western New York and Pennsylvania very hard. In fact, 2 feet already in places in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and 3 feet at Erie. National Guard was called out. Hundreds of people are in temporary shelters. And once again, the meme about electric cars being stuck in snowstorm with an electric car, you're actually much better off. You could survive for days trapped in the snow in an electric car than in a gas car. In fact, you also don't have to worry about getting asphyxiated by your exhaust, but a car battery can run your heater for like a week because it takes much less energy to run a heater than it does to move a car. So if you had an electric car, you were much better off than all those poor suckers in the internal combustion engines. Next weird weather thing, the polar vortexes are coming. They're saying this coming week it's going to get really cold in some places, especially like North Dakota. They're predicting 40 below zero. And once again, this is a symptom of global warming. It doesn't mean global warming isn't happening, because what happens when it warms around the North Pole, the temperature difference between it and the rest of the planet gets less. And so the trade winds don't keep the cold polar wind air surrounding the North Pole. The jet stream weakens, and that allows all that super cold air to come down and freeze us. So just keep that in mind. Next story, we're going off to Busan, South Korea, and they're having the global plastic treaty discussions, and those are supposed to come out. The results are supposed to come out this week, or actually today. They're supposed to announce their final consensus. It doesn't look good. The most recent report I could find was AP from 3 hours ago, and it looks like the plastic people have won. There's the whole controversy, and 102 nations have signed on to the idea that any plastics treaty should have limits on plastic production, because we're being killed by plastic. It's causing all kinds of problems. One problem it costs that a lot of people don't know about is ED, erectile dysfunction. People with high levels of microplastics turns out having trouble in that way. So the countries are pushing for a cap by 2050. Saudi Arabia is leading a group called the Low Ambition Coalition, the LAC Coalition, It includes Saudi Arabia, Russia, and Iran. And they're trying to block any suggestion of a cap. And a lot of the oil producing companies and regions are looking at, well, all right, if you're not going to burn our oil, at least you can make plastic out of it. So a lot of them are thinking they'll transfer from creating fossil fuels to just creating plastics, but that will still kill us in a different way. So there were some protests. Greenpeace is calling South Korea to release 4 protesters, one from UK, Taiwan, Germany, and Mexico. And they were blocking a shipment of propylene into South Korea, which is used to make plastics. And that brings us to our next story, which is from Global Witness. And this actually came out in September. They did their annual report on global martyrs, global eco-martyrs. That is, people who were killed trying to protect the environment, trying to protect you and me. And the number in 2023 was 196. Most of them, or the largest number, were in Colombia. That's a record. 79 environmental activists were murdered in Colombia, 25 in Brazil, 18 in Mexico, Honduras had 18, Philippines had 17. The most common reason people are murdered for protecting the environment is mining, trying to block mines from destroying their regions. Next comes fishing, then logging, then agribusiness. About half the people who were murdered are either indigenous or African descent. The average has gone up. Well, this year was above average. The average since 2015 is about 190 people get killed trying to protect the environment every year, and this year it was 196. All right, coming to the end of the show, and our last story. I was looking for something positive because this has been kind of a downer episode, even without the echo. And Environment America, Colorado. I decided to look up some statistics on Colorado. They have a little thing. It's 5 surprising renewable energy facts for every state in the country. And in Colorado, turns out they have increased solar by 7.5 times, 7.5 times since 2014. They've doubled their wind power since 2014, which means that they're getting more than double, 2.6 times as much power for renewables as they have since 2014. So battery storage is up in Colorado by 240 megawatts. The number of EVs has gone skyrocketing. There's 82,500 EVs registered in Colorado, which is 42 times higher than in 2014. That makes Colorado 7th in the country in terms of charging ports. And as I said, my son, his apartment complex offers 3 hours of free level 2 charging every day, which is all that anybody who takes a normal amount of commuting would need. And so you could have 0 fuel costs, which really helps when you want to pay the rent. Oh, I hear the music. All right, Rebecca, are you still there? Nope. Okay. Well, thanks so much for listening. Sorry if you had technical problems. Check out our website or YouTube video or podcast. This is Joe DeMare signing off.
I don't want no oil spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!